Well, this is chapter 4. I call it Homeward Bound. Kate stayed with her mom barely a block from the hospital and spent her days there. I came and went on a daily basis, mixing work and commuting with visits. The first full week was an agonizingly long one. It was hard to tell if there was any progress, although his seizures seemed to occur with less frequency, and the terrifying length of them had shortened. But Chad displayed little life energy except when the seizure was ongoing. In the middle of the second week, as the powerful cocktail of medications finally caused the seizures to subside, Chad's movement began to become more responsive. His hands, arm, and head all started to show signs of normal, albeit weak, baby-like animation. Dr. Pullman advised us that he now planned to test Chad's capacity to breathe on his own. Before engaging that process, he sat us down for a consult and yet another discussion. I understand that Chaplain Winter and Miss Jennings have spoken with you about placing your child. Have you had some time to consider that option? He began with a subject that set us both back a little. Well, no, we have not really considered placing him. We cannot imagine abandoning him now when he needs us most, Kate responded. Very well, the doctor continued. We also need to discuss the process we are attempting to undertake with him now. He seems to be responding at some level to the medications. If that continues, our next step will be to see if he can breathe without a respirator. Have you thought about how you might respond if we are unable to get him to a place where he can be, at least in this way, self-sustaining? I guess I'm not sure what you're getting at, Doctor, I said as I leaned in, almost as if to hear better. Are you suggesting that he might not ever breathe on his own? That is a possibility. Unless we can wean him off the respirator and test to see if he maintains full oxygenation on his own, we just don't know. If he could not breathe on his own, the two of you will have to consider what we are to do then. Would you be willing to unplug him and see if he survived or not knowing the potential consequences? Would you let him pass away if he could not breathe alone, or would you place him permanently on a respirator? The doctor said as he looked away. I think we want to see how he does when you test him out, Kate tentatively said, searching my eyes for confirmation. I don't think we're prepared to face that kind of ultimate decision until we know how he might respond, I chimed, trying to add some collaborative authority to Kate's conclusion. To this grim and final choice, we did not really offer any definitive response. How could we decide now? Instead, one might say, we crossed our fingers and let the doctor know we would wait for the results before determining any final course. At the end of the second week, we were incredibly relieved to learn that Chad had passed his first test to live. He had begun to breathe on his own. After a few days, as the many wires and monitors were gradually disconnected, they informed us that our child would soon be ready to go home. But it was not a free ride. They had inserted a tube through Chad's umbilical cord almost from the moment of his birth, and the nurses had fed him there. Now, with the tubes all being disconnected, Chad had begun taking nourishment orally. As we prepared to take Chad home, the ER nurses shared with us our upcoming and challenging chores. As part of his stabilization and disconnection, the nurses had begun gavage feedings, a process of putting a tube down his throat to his stomach and gradually introducing food through the tube. It was a procedure, they informed us, we would have to learn to do before he headed home, because Chad's suck reflex was so weak that he would be unable to feed on his own. Like every other medical procedure, it seems, there are risks. Should we install the tube in properly, they grimly informed us, and instead inserted it into his lungs, we would suffocate him in a minute or two if we filled them with milk. We also had to learn the intricacies of Chad's medication. In order to keep the seizures down, we would have to ensure that he got a measured dose twice a day of this nasty, purpley, syrupy liquid. Obediently, we nodded and practiced with Chad as they watched. And with our new and daunting training completed to their satisfaction, we bundled up our little child and headed home. For a time, Kate stayed home from teaching, but her maternal leave ran out with 2 weeks left of school. Fortunately, my mother, who lived a mile away, volunteered to care for Chad. What I appreciate more fully 40 years later is what a profoundly positive role model my mother was. And her care of Chad reflected the core of her being. As an RN, she was fully prepared for the challenges of all of our new chores. But more than that, Mom was a fixer. There was no job too challenging, no new project that could not be tucked into 10 she already had. When my mother was born, Grandmother wanted to name her Priscilla, because, you see, our ancestry dated all the way back to the Mayflower. But Grandpa was the one who went to the courthouse to fill out her birth certificate, and he put down Joyce. She was neither prissy nor silly, and Grandpa intuitively knew that on day one. The name Joyce means cheerful and merry, and Mom was all of that and much more. Had he given Joyce a middle name, it would have been Pollyanna, because Joyce always saw the good in people and in every situation. Were one to acknowledge her favorite children's stories, one she reminded us long into adulthood, they would be the little choo-choo engine that could, and the little red hen that would do it herself. Joyce could, and she did. Mom stepped in. She would contribute to Chad's full recovery. He would be just fine, she assured us. All he needed was love and attention, of which she had an abundance. For the next few weeks, we did a trial run on what would become the fall routine. Grandma would be in charge during the school day, and Kate would wrap Chad's care for the remaining 15 hours a day around her teaching chores. With their monumental effort, Chad made all the progress he could. We had abandoned the gavaging process almost as soon as we made it home with Chad. Instead, that meant Kate would have to give him an hour or more for each feeding. He grew, filled out, and gradually gained the ability to self-feed. Getting him stable and growing gave us hope, but as he grew, signs began to appear that all was not well. It would be a long summer and an even longer fall. And that's my 4th chapter. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll try to stay on track for more.